Hello, everyone. It's really nice to sort of see you. I'm waving. So this is the first time I'm trying to use this software exactly for this purpose. So this is sort of an experiment. We're going to see how it goes, but I think it might be really helpful for us. So just so you guys know what I'm going to go over, I'm just going to kind of talk through the literary terms in your pink chart, and then we're going to look at the prologue on page 364 of your Springboard packets. And then we're also going to look at page 365 of the Springboard packets and go through those first four questions. So, firstly, just to kind of go through these lit terms, and I'm not going to spend too much time on them because y'all can send me questions individually if you need to about them. The first four terms, honestly, should be very familiar to you: simile, metaphor, personification, and foreshadow. We have talked about those already in class multiple times. What we're going to really focus on today is writing structure. So shortly in a minute, I'm going to talk to you more about iambic pentameter, sonnet, stanza, quatrain, and couplet. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand all of those words. Since we are looking at the prologue today, we will also talk about prologue. And then I think probably most of you should be familiar with dialogue already, correct me if I'm wrong, but especially because we use that in our short stories. At a later point in time, we will go over monologue, soliloquy, and aside, but we're not going to go over that quite yet. You can obviously feel free to read the definitions yourself if you want to, but I'll talk to you about those later. And then we have our dramatic terms, which we have dramatic irony. I know that one's kind of a hard term, but we did go over that already in our Unit 2. Then we have, I think, kind of some newer terms. We have foil, tragedy, tragic hero, and tragic flaw. And again, we're going to go over those terms a little later. Tragedy is, I think you guys are already kind of familiar with what a tragedy is, but it's a play or a film or a story in which the main character suffers a downfall. So, unfortunately, Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy, but that's okay. We're going to still enjoy the story as we read it. All right, so for our writing structure terms, we have iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter is a type of meter that has 10 syllables in a line of poetry. For example, this is actually the opening line of our prologue we're about to look at. Two houses both alike in dignity. I'm purposely reading it that way so that you can hear the different syllables in there. But if you look at this, we can count together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 syllables there. Shakespeare is incredibly, he's incredibly famous for many reasons, but one of them is that he's known for is that he writes almost the entirety of all of his plays in iambic pentameter. So there's exactly 10 syllables per line throughout almost the entirety of the play. Some of these lines are going to be rhyming, which we're going to talk about what that kind of emphasizes momentarily. And every once in a while, he does have some lines that don't follow the iambic pentameter structure, and there's reasons for that as well. Shakespeare also wrote lots of sonnets, which is a specific form of poetry. So a sonnet is 14 lines of iambic pentameter. So that means there's 14 lines in the poem, and each one of the lines is written in iambic pentameter. So here's our example. A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. This is how Shakespeare writes, and I'm actually going to go ahead and label these this rhyme scheme on our prologue in just a second, because our prologue is actually an example of a sonnet. I'm going to write that right here. Example, prologue, yay. All right, so we already know a stanza because we've talked about poetry a lot. So a stanza would be a unit or group of lines in poetry that are separated by spaces. So, for example, you could potentially have 4 lines of poetry that are separated into a stanza. Remember, we talked about how stanzas are just poetry paragraphs. And then we have these two terms, which these are going to be a little newer, but pretty easy. Quatrain is a 4-line stanza. A couplet is a 2-line stanza. So you can kind of look at the root words in here with quat and, well, cup, but couple, right? So think of couple, right? That's 2 people. Quat, if you think of words like court or quarter, they come from the same root word, which we know with the words quarter or court, that root means 4. Okay, cool. So we're going to apply some of these terms now to our prologue. So I'm going to switch my papers here. You can feel free as we work, well, don't feel free, feel encouraged, and like you should, read the literary terms that appear on the left and right sides as we work through the springboard texts. These are just going to reinforce some of these definitions for you. We definitely went through and simplified some of the definitions. So, for example, you can obviously tell that the definition for tragedy here is a lot longer than the one that we gave you. But it's a good idea to read both. So we're going to focus on the prologue here. So this is the prologue from Romeo and Juliet, obviously written by William Shakespeare. And this is how our play would start. So I'm going to go ahead and read through it. 2 households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage. The which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. All right, so I don't know if you could hear it as I was reading, but remember, each one of these lines is in iambic pentameter. 2 households both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. So you can kind of hear the iambic pentameter, like 10-syllable lines in there. Actually, after you watch the TED Talk that you're supposed to watch today as well, hopefully you'll understand a little more about iambic pentameter. I think Akala does a really good job of explaining like the heartbeat and kind of how it goes, like da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. Just to kind of give you a little further information here for iambic pentameter. So an iamb actually is that da-dum, like 2-syllable beat. Penta, any of you who I don't know if you guys didn't take geometry yet, I don't think. But if you know that root word penta, that means 5. And then meter kind of means per line. So if you actually break down this word, it means like 5 groups of 2 syllables per line. So it's literally a math problem. 5 times 2 equals 10. Look at that. We are distance learning Shakespeare and math. Awesome job, guys. Okay, so now let's talk about the prologue. Since we're going to go through our lit terms, obviously I talked about iambic pentameter. This is a sonnet. The reason it's a sonnet is because it meets some very specific requirements. It is in iambic pentameter, number 1. It does follow a very specific rhyme scheme that we talked about, which I'm going to label in a second. And we can see that there are kind of like separated quatrains and couplets through here, even though this appears as one complete stanza. I'm going to take just a little liberty with the definitions of quatrain and couplet just for emphasis of the rhyme scheme. So some of you, I think, already know this, but when you Once you here, I'm going to move a little bit closer. There we go. When you want to label a rhyme scheme in poetry, you simply look at the end rhyme, and I know y'all know this because we just took a test on it the day before we had to leave. So the end rhyme is just the last letter, or I'm sorry, not the last letter, the last word, per line. So our first one here, dignity, that's going to be labeled with the letter A because that's our first rhyming word. So who can find the next rhyming word? Is it seen? Obviously not. Mutiny. Okay, so mutiny rhymes with dignity, so that also gets labeled with an A. Our next word, our next end word as we move down would be seen. Seen gets labeled with a B. Okay, so we have dignity, seen, mutiny, unclean. There we go. Unclean rhymes with seen. And maybe now that we've gone through what true rhyme and slant rhyme and assonance and consonants are, maybe you guys can hear some of those things as we work through this. Next we have foes, rhymes with overthrows, so they get labeled with a C. We have life and strife, so they both get labeled with the letter D. Then we have love and remove. And you guys are probably thinking, Miss Curran, that doesn't rhyme. Shakespeare isn't that cool. Well, keep in mind, 500 years ago, when he wrote this, people did speak and pronounce things slightly differently. So it would be more like love, maybe like love, remove. Okay, so like they would have kind of had a slightly different accent when they said that. So these words actually did rhyme. Then we have stage and rage, which both get F and F. Then we have our really cool last two end words, GG. So obviously you can see the pattern here, okay? A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, GG. So all of Shakespeare's sonnets, which again are just poems, follow this very, very specific exact rhyme scheme. Also, periodically throughout his plays, he worked in this exact rhyme scheme. We're going to look at this again during a conversation Romeo and Juliet have later on after we start reading. Hang on, I'm going to drink some coffee. Okay. But already, I think just kind of cool that he's able to follow these patterns. What I was talking about before with the quatrain, now, technically these are not split up into different stanzas here, but just again to kind of emphasize, we could think of this as like a quatrain, right? Because that's a group of four with the rhyme scheme. We can think of this as a quatrain because that's a group of four. We can think of this as a group of four, quatrain. And then at the end, obviously this is not a quatrain because it's not 4 lines, it's 2 lines. And I know you all are sitting there going, duh, Miss Kern, it's a couplet. Yep, okay. So this is kind of how we label and apply the literary terms to the structure here. Now I want to talk about the actual meaning of some of these things. So firstly, the purpose of the prologue. Your first question on the next page is, what is the purpose of the prologue? Well, we just looked at definitions, and we know that a prologue is the... I'll move it over here. A prologue is the opening lines of a drama that give background information. So if this is giving us background information, what is it telling us? Well, it's telling us that this story is going to be about 2 households, both alike in dignity. So dignity means rank. So that means they're very similar in terms of rank or like social standing. Okay. So equal social standing. In fair Verona, which is our city in Italy, where we lay our scene. So Shakespeare's telling us the setting, and he's kind of also dropping like the main plot point here, that there's these 2 households, very similar in their social standing, who have an ancient grudge against each other. Okay, so from this ancient grudge, they break into a new mutiny. We see here mutiny means rebellion against authority. So the fighting between these 2 households is going to get pretty bad. Where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. So clearly with this reference to blood, we're going to have some issues in this play. And in fact, the very first scene that you read is going to be a huge street fight. I am going to skip over just a little bit because I just wanted to kind of point out something that I think is kind of clever and funny. Towards the end here, we have our last 3 lines. So all this stuff that he kind of summarizes is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage. So why would Shakespeare tell his audience that the play is 2 hours long? If this was 500 years ago, why do you think it would be important for the audience to know that? Well, before you guys go to a movie, you probably have some idea of how long the movie is, right? Most of you probably look up the movie times, or you kind of scope out how long the movie is, and that might inform your decision as to whether or not you actually feel like watching it. Well, 500 years ago, they didn't really have movie listings, so Shakespeare's telling his audience up front that this is going to be 2 hours, kind of like strap in, pay attention for 2 hours, that's how long you're going to be here. If you attend, which means listen, so if you listen with patient ears, if you miss anything, our toil or hard work will try really hard to fix it. So I'm just kind of translating the Shakespeare for you. But basically, if you patiently listen to the plot and you wait for the plot to unfold and you listen to our actors, if you miss any important information, we're going to work really hard throughout the play to make sure that you totally understand everything that's going on. So Shakespeare's literally telling his audience to be calm. Now, unfortunately, since we're not in person, you guys didn't get to see my really awesome Shakespeare PowerPoint. I know you're all so devastated about it. But within that PowerPoint, I actually have a video of my sister and I at the Globe Theatre, which is where Shakespeare's plays were all performed. So we went to London, England a few years ago. We actually had an opportunity to see a Shakespeare play at the Globe Theatre, which I don't know if you guys can appreciate this, but clearly I'm a huge English nerd. So I was kind of nerding out when I went there. It was very cool. But I did manage to snag a quick Snapchat video, even though you're definitely not allowed to videotape anything in there. But I am revealing to you that, yes, I have 10 seconds of video inside the Globe Theatre. But you would have seen on that video that you can kind of see how it's set up and where the audience is. And all of this going to say that back in Shakespeare's day, the cool thing about the Globe was that nobility, so even like Queen Elizabeth of England would go to see Shakespeare's plays at the Globe Theatre. And she would have this really cool box seat, you know, up on the second level. But then all like the peasants and commoners of much lower social classes would buy like cheaper tickets for the standing room, which I know you guys know what that is from concerts. So they would be in the standing room section, kind of like on the floor in front of the stage. And if audiences didn't like a play or like a piece of entertainment, I'll say, whether it was like a play or something musical or whatever, it was actually common social practice to just pelt the actors and the performers on stage with rotten fruit, and they would boo them and throw things at them and literally run them off the stage until they were more entertaining. So that kind of long story just goes to tell you that Shakespeare is actually asking the audience to just be well behaved during the 2 hours of his play so that they can carefully listen to what's going on and so that everyone in the audience can enjoy the play. Because remember, they didn't have microphones back then. So if everybody was talking and yelling, nobody could hear the actors say their lines. So even 500 years ago, people, you know, were worried about silencing their phones in movie theaters, essentially. That's what Shakespeare's telling you to do. Okay. So that's pretty much our talk of the sonnet. If you want to continue watching, I'm going to go over the answers to the questions, and then we'll be done. So, number one, what is the main... Oh, whoops, sorry, hang on. Yeah. What is the main purpose of the prologue? To give background info. And what is our background info? So, it takes place in Verona, Italy. Okay, and we have 2 families fighting. I I'm just going to go ahead and tell you the family names. The family names are the Montagues and Capulets. And tomorrow you're actually going to do a little thing with character identification. So I don't want to go too much into that. Then we have, how does the structure of the prologue reflect the play's central theme? This is going to be very difficult for you because you don't have a background in sonnets and Shakespeare, etc. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you the answer here. But the structure of the prologue is in a sonnet. So the sonnet form, hopefully y'all can figure that out because we just went through and talked about that a lot. But you may not know how the sonnet contributes to the theme. So sonnets typically are focused on themes of love. Okay, so anytime really that you're seeing a sonnet, it's focused on a theme of love. Oftentimes sonnets are about unrequited love. Unrequited, I'm going to write that down for you because that's a excellent word for you guys to know. Unrequited love. And that just means like unreturned love. So if you love someone, but they don't have the same feelings for you. And so could be about unrequited love. In our case, we're going to be talking about some star-crossed lovers. And that phrase is still used very commonly today, and Shakespeare's the one that made that up, okay? And I think, where was it? So we have in line 6 here, a pair of star-crossed lovers. That's our Romeo and Juliet right there. And so he gives us a little preview of what's going to happen in this play. If you are reading carefully, you can figure it out. You already know the end. All right, so the sonnet form emphasizes that the play will focus on love. Okay, in our case, these star-crossed lovers, or sort of like fate is against their love. I'll put it that way, against their love. Okay. All right, questions 3 and 4, and then we're done. So examine the masks over here, which are a common graphic representation of drama. What do the two masks represent? So just look at their faces, right? We're going to use our Dr. Seuss words real quick, and then I'm going to give you some way better words. This guy looks pretty sad, and this guy looks pretty glad, right? But we have significantly better words for that. The sad mask actually represents, so we're going to put a big X through that because I never want to hear you say that again, actually represents tragedy. And the glad mask represents comedy. Okay, so back then, typically, there were plays that made you happy and made you laugh, and then there were plays that made you sad. I mean, even right now in today's culture, those are kind of two of the major genres of things that we would use to entertain ourselves with. We have a couple more now, like, you know, the horror genre where you are using entertainment to make yourself feel afraid. I kind of imagine back then they didn't really need entertainment to make them feel afraid because there was, like, you know, the whole bubonic plague thing and all that stuff going around. And also they didn't quite live in as advanced of a structured society, so I think they probably had enough fear at that point. They didn't really need to do it for fun. So what do the two masks represent? They represent tragedy and comedy, which together are two types of drama. So those are our two types of, like, dramatic plays. Since we know our play is going to be a tragedy, so You're going to feel like this at the end of the play. Wah, wah. Just list words that you associate with the term tragedy. And I don't care what words you write down. If you need to start with some Dr. Seuss ones, that's fine. And then try to add a few key words from the prologue. So I'll do mine, but I want you to do this part by yourselves, preferably. Let's see. So sad, upset, devastated, depressed. Here, wait, let me move my paper up a little bit. Horrible. Okay, right? If something is a tragedy, it's like upsetting, it's devastating, depressing, it's horrible. I don't know if you guys want to come up with any other words. Are there any words from our prologue that kind of mean the same thing? I don't know. I think probably mutiny, grudge, right? Those both seem like kind of tragic things. Piteous, that means pathetic, right? Misadventured kind of means like remember we were talking about like prefixes and root words and stuff. Misadventure is sort of like an adventure that you shouldn't have taken. All right, so misadventure, piteous, that literally means pathetic or like something to be pitied. Grudge, mutiny. We also have death in here. We have death-marked love, okay? So let's see. Death, grudge, mutiny, misadventure, and pity. So death, grudge, mutiny, misadventure, piteous. I think, did I get them all? I think I did. Either way, that's a pretty good list. So we already kind of know what to expect once we start reading this play. All right. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to point out to you. Obviously, you have some more information here about sonnets and iambic pentameter if you want to review that. More definitions, and hopefully I will be able to do these screen recordings like as we work through different pieces of text. And I don't know, maybe I might send out like a reminder, a little Google form or something like that, just to try to get some feedback from you guys of how this went. Like if you can see me, hear me, if I need to go faster, I don't know. I think the cool thing about this is that you can pause the video whenever you want. You can fast forward me, you can rewind me if you zoned out halfway through while I was talking, which I know happens in class sometimes. Don't worry, I don't take it personally because I know I'm fabulously interesting. But maybe you're just very tired. You can always actually just rewind the video and rewatch whatever I just said. So in a way, I think this might actually be even cooler than being in class, although I am definitely going to miss you guys. And I will probably send you some videos or pictures at some point, but definitely not right now because I'm sitting here at 8 a.m. in my PJs. So different day. You'll get an update. Okay, that's what we'll look at next. A little preview, but not on this video. Okay, bye guys. Have a good day. Thanks for listening.